The moment I stepped through the door of that courtroom, my daughter, Lauren Vance, let out a nervous little laugh. My son-in-law, Rob Vance, just shook his head, as if I were a pathetic, inherited joke that he simply had to endure. Then the judge looked up and went white as a sheet. His gavel slipped from his trembling hand, and, almost voiceless, he muttered a name that no one else in the room knew. A man who had been buried for years, the scalpel, was looking directly at me. My family thought they were putting a senile old man in a cage. They had no idea they had just declared war on a ghost. It all started, as these things often do, with an insult I was supposed to ignore. It was Sunday dinner. I was sitting at the far end of a polished mahogany table so long it looked like a runway. Lauren and Rob were playing king and queen in their Los Angeles mansion, which overlooked a canyon and had an infinity pool that seemed to melt into the horizon. "The infinity edge is non-negotiable, Rob," she said, her voice sharp. "It has to look immaculate, like it's pouring straight down into the canyon." Rob squeezed into one of those custom-made suits that was always a half size too tight. Didn't look up from his phone. "Whatever you want, honey. As soon as I close this 9-figure deal in Arizona, I'll fill the whole thing with champagne," he boasted, showing off about a guaranteed play, a 9-figure business deal that couldn't possibly fail. They talked right over me, arguing about pool contractors, big-time operations, and Lauren's next charity gala. As if I were an old piece of inherited furniture they didn't quite know where to put. "My name is Elijah Hayes. I'm 71 years old, and in that house I was invisible. Since my wife Constance passed away 10 years ago, I did what I thought was right. I sold our big family home in Greenwich, Connecticut, a house full of memories that were choking me, and bought the hidden guest house at the back of their enormous property. I wanted to be close to my only daughter, Constance's only child. It was what I thought she would have wanted. My 16-year-old grandson, Tyrese, seemed to be the only one who remembered I existed. He spoke up from the other end of the table. "Grandpa, my championship playoff game is next week. Want to come? We're playing Palisades High." Before I could open my mouth, Rob cut him off with a tone of false cordiality, loaded with contempt, without even deigning to look at me. "Ty, don't bother your grandfather. He needs to rest. He's an old man." Lauren let out a little sweet-sounding giggle that cut right through me like a knife. "He's right, honey. Leave him be. I bet he's tired just from sitting there." They decided for me, diagnosing my energy, my desires, and practically my entire existence without giving me a second glance. I didn't say anything. I just watched the pattern on my plate, where a cold, untouched piece of asparagus lay chilling. I had allowed myself to become a ghost in my own life, and the worst part was that I had let it happen. I mistook my silence for patience, when in reality, it was permission. 3 days later, a sharp knock hit the door of my guest house. It was Rob. That was unusual. He avoided my place like the plague, probably because it lacked the gold fixtures of the main house. He held a ridiculously expensive bottle of wine, placing it in front of me with a salesman's smile. "For you, Eli, the best." He knew I didn't drink. My cardiologist had been very clear after my bypass surgery. This gesture wasn't kindness. It was theater. Rob had always been a salesman. He sold real estate dreams. He sold the image of a perfect family. He sold the idea of success. I'd seen his type my whole life. They don't enter a place, they appraise it. He didn't waste time. After a superficial comment about the weather, he cut straight to the chase. "Eli, I'm sitting on the opportunity of a lifetime, a resort in Arizona. The deal's almost done, but we hit a tiny regulatory snag. I just need a little bridge loan to unlock the permits, nothing more than showing liquidity. He leaned on, covering me with the scent of overpowering cologne. I know this guest house is in your name and free and clear. It's just sitting here, not working. All you have to do is put it up as collateral. $500,000. That's all. Sensing my silence, he accelerated like he was closing a sale. 6 months max, I'll pay you back $700,000. That's a 40% return, Eli. You won't find that anywhere. I looked at him. It wasn't enthusiasm. It was desperation. A thin sheen of sweat was forming on his forehead. Rob, I said, my voice completely flat, I'm 71 years old. I'm past the stage of taking risks. My money is for my retirement, and frankly, for my medical expenses. The answer is no. The change was instantaneous, like a mask being ripped off. The smile dissolved, replaced by a cold, reptilian resentment. Unbelievable, he spat. Truly unbelievable. After everything we do for you, you live here on our property, not paying rent. Paid or not, I bought this house, Rob, I interrupted slowly. And you won't even lift a finger to help your own family? God! What a selfish old man. He said I lived on his land. He didn't know, or had chosen to forget, that when I bought the guest house 10 years ago, I had not only acquired the building, but the 5 acres upon which their mansion sat. He held a 99-year lease for $1 a year from me. He was living on my land and had no clue. He slammed the bottle of wine onto the coffee table so hard it made me jump. You're going to regret this, old man. You're going to regret being so selfish. He stormed out, slamming the door. The vibration made the photo of Constance on my desk tremble. A week later, I woke up at 3 a.m. with a dull ache in my chest that traveled down my left arm. It wasn't the sharp jab of a heart attack, but the familiar, suffocating embrace of angina. Stress, just what my cardiologist had warned about. Don't play the hero, Mr. Hayes. Call emergency services. My first call was to the main house, to Lauren. She answered on the 4th ring, her voice thick with sleep and annoyance. Dad, what is it? It's the middle of the night. Honey, I don't feel well, I said, trying to stay calm. My chest hurts. It's not unbearable. But could you take me to the clinic, just to be sure? On the other end of the line, I heard a deep, heavy sigh, the sound of someone being profoundly bothered. Dad, seriously, I have the big charity committee meeting tomorrow morning. Everyone's coming here. I can't. If it's that serious, call 911. Don't overreact. Click. She hung up. She didn't ask how intense the pain was or if I was scared. She just told me I was overreacting. The tightness in my chest grew harder, but this time it wasn't coming from my heart. I ordered a rideshare. I sat in the back of a sedan, clutching my chest, and let a stranger drive me to the emergency room. It was stress-induced angina. They placed a nitroglycerin pill under my tongue and kept me under observation for 4 hours. At 9 a.m., I was discharged. I ordered another rideshare back. Arriving at the property's large gates, I saw Lauren's pearl-white Range Rover. It wasn't parked in front of the main house, but outside a spa in Beverly Hills, where she was holding her charity meeting. They weren't just disrespecting me. They saw me as just another resource to be exploited, a nuisance, a problem to be managed, an errand that could be ignored. In that moment, I knew something had to change. What I didn't realize was how quickly that change would arrive. The next morning, as I sipped black coffee and watched the fog lift from the canyon, a sharp, impatient knock echoed at my door. It wasn't Rob. His knock was arrogant. This sound was professional. I opened it and found a man in an immaculate uniform, a digital scanner in one hand and a stiff white envelope in the other. "Mr. Elijah Hayes," he asked in a neutral voice. "Express Legal Service. Sign here." I signed the screen. He handed me the envelope and left before I could close the door. It weighed more from its intent than from the paper inside. My hands were steady as I took the letter opener Constance had given me 30 years ago. I opened the envelope and pulled out the documents. The words jumped out, cold and precise. A legal petition. A lawsuit filed with the Los Angeles Superior Court. The petitioners were Robert Vance and Lauren Vance. The defendant was me. I scanned the first page, my vision narrowing. They were requesting an urgent hearing, petitioning for a legal guardianship. They were accusing me, Elijah Hayes, of being mentally incapacitated. They claimed I was no longer capable of handling my financial affairs or medical decisions, that I was senile. It wasn't just an insult or simple greed, it was a legal execution. They wanted to erase me, to turn me into a ward of the state, with them pulling the strings. They wanted my invisibility to become official, legally binding. I flipped it to the next page. Exhibit A, the assessment. A 3-page report, signed by a supposed psychological expert named Dr. Arthur Lynch. According to his evaluation, I displayed severe symptoms of dementia, paranoid delusions, and an inability to understand financial realities, concluding gravely that I was a danger to myself and my own assets. I let out a dry laugh that sounded more like a cough. I had never met anyone named Arthur Lynch in my life. I didn't knock on the mansion's door. I didn't hesitate. I held the lawsuit in my hand, the white paper a brutal contrast against my skin, and walked. I crossed the perfect lawn that separated my world from theirs and headed straight for the main house. The glass doors to the patio were open. I heard the clinking of ice in glasses and soft, empty music. As I imagined, they were by the pool. Lauren was lounging on a deck chair, her sunglasses pushed to her forehead, a magazine resting on her stomach. Rob was standing behind the outdoor bar, pouring himself another cocktail. They looked tranquil, satisfied, like predators who have set a trap and are patiently waiting for the prey to bleed out. I stepped onto the patio. The music stopped. My shadow covered Lauren. She sat up abruptly and pushed her sunglasses down. "Dad, what are you doing? Are you interrupting?" She froze when she saw the papers. She didn't look at my face. She looked at the folder. Rob turned with a fake smile. "Eli, we were just about..." Then, he saw the lawsuit. The smile didn't just disappear. It twisted into a grimace of annoyance before he forced himself to adopt a look of feigned concern. I held up the envelope. "What is this?" I asked. Lauren shrugged, looking away toward the water, unable to meet my eyes. Rob, however, went into actor mode. He put down his glass, wiped his hands on a towel, and crossed his arms, adopting a stance of superiority. "Dad," he said with a condescending tone, "we hoped you wouldn't have to find out this way. We were going to talk to you right before the hearing." "What is this?" I repeated. "It's for your own good," he replied, taking a step forward. "Look, after that little heart scare last week, Lauren and I understood that you can't take care of yourself anymore. You're forgetting things. You get confused." I had indigestion. "Rob," I said. He waved a dismissive hand. "That's what you think. But you were in pain, disoriented. And if the next time is worse, someone has to manage things. Protect your finances. Make sure your bills are paid. Make your medical decisions before, You hurt yourself. He was manipulating me, trying to make me doubt my own perception, using the very episode they ignored as evidence of my incapacity. I looked at my daughter. Lauren, is this what you want? To sign a paper that says your own father is crazy? She finally looked at me, but her eyes were hard, reflecting only the blue of the pool. It's for the best, Dad. We just want to help you. We love you, she said, as if the word meant nothing. You have no idea what loving means, I replied. That's when Rob lost patience. The mask of the concerned son-in-law fell away, leaving the vulture in plain view. He let out a short, ugly laugh. We'll see you in court, old man, he spat. Honestly, this only proves our point. You're paranoid. Exactly what Dr. Lynch said. He raised his glass in a mocking toast. You'd better get a public defender, because I highly doubt you can afford a real lawyer. That was the limit. That was the moment the fragile, forgetful old man they thought they knew died. And something else, something they were totally unprepared for, woke up. I returned to the guest house, closed the door, and the click of the lock was the loudest sound I had ever heard in my life. The sound of a line being drawn, a definitive boundary. To them, that space was the room of a senile old man, a silent, beige box where I would doze until I was managed and forgotten. They had never once seen the other door. It was at the back of the closet, hidden behind a row of suits I hardly ever wore. It didn't have a normal lock. It had a biometric fingerprint scanner. I pressed my thumb on the cool glass. The light turned green, and a heavy bolt slid back with a discreet, expensive click. I walked in. This was my real home. Inside, there was no bed or reclining chair, only floor-to-ceiling bookshelves, 3 enormous monitors, a wall of metal filing cabinets, and an encrypted satellite phone system. The air was cool and still. Rob thought I was a retired office worker, a simple accountant from a mid-sized Connecticut firm whose greatest life achievement was saving for a comfortable old age. He had no idea. 30 years ago, in Washington, D.C., I wasn't Eli. To the CEOs of Fortune 500 companies, to corrupt senators and high-level politicians, I had another name. They called me the Scalpel. I was the Department of Justice's chief forensic investigator, the man they sent in when the numbers didn't just look wrong. They looked impossible. I didn't just follow the money trail. I cut it wide open. I found the financial tumors, the hidden accounts, the secret ledgers everyone else missed. I was the man who sent 12 senior executives to prison with a single spreadsheet. I walked away from all of it. I buried that man the day Constance got her first cancer diagnosis. I traded my armored office and the adrenaline of the hunt for hospital waiting rooms and chemotherapy schedules. I did it without thinking. I became a full-time husband, then a widower, then a father, trying to reconnect with a daughter I barely knew, and finally, an invisible grandfather. I let the Scalpel die because my family needed Eli. That day, Rob and my own daughter gave the Scalpel an excellent reason to come out of retirement. I sat down at the keyboard, ignored the normal phone line, and picked up the secure handset. My fingers didn't tremble as I dialed the 11 digits I hadn't used in 10 years, but had never forgotten. It rang twice. A sharp, professional voice answered. Science and Associates? Rebecca speaking? Rebecca, I said. It's Elijah Hayes. There was a silence, not of confusion, but of shock, of recognition. Mr. Hayes, my God, we thought you fell off the map. My father asks about you all the time. He always wondered what happened to the Scalpel. I'm in Los Angeles, Rebecca. I need you here tomorrow. Bring your best team, the ones who know how to dig deep. The pause was shorter. This time, The amazement was gone, replaced by the steel I remembered. "Tell me what they did," she requested. "They filed a petition for guardianship. They say I'm senile. They want to take everything." A short, humorless laugh came over the line. "You? Senile? They have no idea, do they? They have no idea who they just tried to lock up." Her voice turned strictly professional. "Understood, Scalpel. I'm on my way. Just tell me where you want me to make the first cut." Rebecca arrived at 10 o'clock the next morning. She didn't look like a flashy Los Angeles lawyer. No ostentatious car, no $1,000 handbag. She wore a dark, simple pantsuit, her hair pulled back in a severe bun, and eyes the color of cold steel. She carried a thin briefcase. She was the opposite of Rob. Substance, not posture. The daughter of an old prosecutor colleague, she was all nerve and method, just like her father. She wasted no time on pleasantries. She entered my hidden office and scanned it with a single look, like someone analyzing a war map. The servers, the monitors, the filing cabinets. She nodded once, slowly. "They really have no idea, do they?" "No. They still think I'm a confused old man," I replied, sliding the lawsuit across the desk. "And here's their proof. Exhibit A, Dr. Arthur Lynch." Rebecca took the document. She didn't need to read the whole thing. The name and the signature were enough. Dr. Arthur Lynch, psychological evaluation, perfect. She opened her briefcase, took out a tablet, and typed the name into a secure database. "Give me 3 hours." "Take 2, I replied. She cracked a thin smile that didn't reach her eyes. "I'll call you in 1. And she left with the same discretion she arrived with. Meanwhile, I didn't wait. I began drawing the financial architecture of Vance Holdings GP and the other shell corporations I knew he had created. I was assembling the skeleton. Rebecca would bring the flesh. Exactly 58 minutes later, the secure line rang. "Eli, it's Rebecca." "That was fast." "It wasn't hard," she said with digital coldness. "When someone is this sloppy, the threads are lying on the floor, waiting to be picked up. And you're not going to believe this. Surprise me. First, Dr. Arthur Lynch is not a psychologist." I waited. "Nor a psychiatrist, nor a neurologist, nor even a general practitioner. He's not a doctor of medicine." "Then what is he, Rebecca?" "He's a dentist." She let the word hang in the air. "A dentist, a man who cleans plaque and fills cavities, signing an affidavit declaring me mentally incompetent." The arrogance was almost artistic. "A dentist," I repeated. "Or rather, an ex-dentist," she corrected me. "The California Dental Board permanently revoked his license 5 years ago. Now, for the good part. Massive insurance fraud, invented surgeries, and his specialty, illegally prescribing opioids, thousands of pills. He ran a pill mill out of a strip mall in Reseda. Rob hadn't just looked for any expert he could bribe. He had found a criminal, a disgraced professional with no license, desperate for money, already dirty up to his neck, and with nothing left to lose. But the important question wasn't who Lynch was, but how Rob had found him. "You don't just stumble upon a discredited dentist from Reseda on Google, Rebecca," I said. "A real estate developer like Rob doesn't accidentally bump into this guy." "That's what I thought," she replied. "It wasn't a social connection. It was a financial one. When he was arrested 5 years ago, Lynch faced 10 felony charges. Bail was set at $100,000 and he didn't have a dime. A bail bondsman? Exactly. A bail bond company covered the amount, but required a guarantor, someone to sign and put up collateral in case he fled. Who was the guarantor, Rebecca? A paper company, a limited liability company registered in Delaware with the sole purpose of asset management. "The name?" I asked, though I already knew. "Vance Holdings GP," she said. I leaned back in the chair. The pieces didn't just fit, they clicked into place. Rob hadn't found Lynch last week. or bribed him last month. He had owned him for 5 years. He paid his bail. He probably paid his lawyer. He kept him on a short leash, tucked away in his pocket, waiting for the day he needed a doctor willing to sign a paper. This wasn't an impulsive burst of greed after I refused the loan. That refusal was just the final test. This was a contingency plan, a premeditated play. He had been planning to declare me incompetent and seize my assets for years. "Rebecca," I said, my voice low and hard, "you just disarmed their main weapon. You neutralized the expert witness. Now it's my turn. Keep digging the legal side. Get Lynch's entire criminal file and the name of the attorney Rob paid. I'll handle the numbers." I closed the door, reducing the world to the glow of my 3 monitors. That was where I really lived, not in the quiet guest house, but inside the data. Rob thought finance in my day was handled with paper ledgers and green visors. He didn't understand what I am, a digital ghost about to haunt every server he had ever touched. I started with the company that paid Lynch's bail, Vance Holdings GP, an anonymous, shielded Delaware LLC. Rob might be careless, but he wasn't stupid. He knew the basics of asset protection. He had stacked his structures. Vance Holdings owned Arizona Properties LLC, which in turn belonged to the Vance Family Trust, a Russian doll of entities designed to prevent anyone from seeing who truly owned what. However, he made a rookie mistake, a critical, fatal flaw: arrogance. He was in a hurry, and he was cheap. To register all those LLCs, file the forms in Delaware and California, and open the accounts, he used the same personal email address for every single transaction, an old address he probably thought was clever. robvance@hotmail.com, an email he might not have checked in years, buried and forgotten. He didn't know that old server never completely erase anything. I didn't need to hack his account. That would be illegal. And I was going to do this while respecting the rules. Nor did I need to read his messages. I just needed to see who he had communicated with. I ran the email through several databases I still had access to, old backdoors into the financial system that the Department of Justice had opened decades ago and forgotten to close. I was looking for patterns: correspondence with banks, transfers, credit applications. In 20 minutes, I had the first big hit. The email was linked to a secure data room, a virtual vault where lenders and debtors exchanged confidential documents. Rob had been very, very busy. It wasn't just any bank, no Wells Fargo or Chase. It was a private equity firm whose name made the hair on my arms stand up: Apex, Citadel Capital. They weren't bankers. They were vulture funds, investment funds that prey on people and companies in ruin. They don't lend to solid businesses. They hunt desperate men like Rob, rejected by every bank, and throw them a rope with an anchor attached. I didn't have access to the vault's content, but I did have access to the server logs. I saw file names, email subjects, connection times. It was a bloodbath. The Arizona project, that guaranteed 9-figure deal, was an absolute disaster. Rob had run out of cash halfway through construction. He had falsified liquidity reports to get the initial loan. He had lied to contractors who were starting to file liens. He hadn't just burned a few million. The records showed a total capital burn of $50 million, and Apex Citadel had already found out. The emails stopped being cordial. They became frantic, a cascade of automated notices of default, followed by direct messages from Rob pleading for extensions. Just 60 more days. The project is solid. It's a momentary cash flow problem. Until the final email appeared, the one that explained everything. An urgent demand for more cash, sent a week before. The day after, I rejected his $500,000 request. The fund wasn't just angry. It was activating the emergency clause of the contract, demanding an immediate payment of $5 million. Not 500,000, but $5 million in a single lump sum. Deadline, 10 business days. If he didn't pay, they wouldn't just take the Arizona property. They would activate the cross-collateralization clause, which allowed them to seize everything he had put up as collateral. The mansion, the cars, the accounts, a clause he had signed without reading. It allowed them to execute everything. Vance Holdings, the mansion, Lauren's SUV, every dime in every account in his name. They were going to wipe him off the map. I stared at the screen, feeling the pieces fit together with cold, perfect logic. He didn't need my loan as a bridge for permits. He needed it as a desperate good faith payment to keep the wolves at bay. When I said no, he activated his contingency plan, the one he had been holding on to for 5 years. He didn't just want my guest house or my retirement fund. He was bankrupt, and he wanted my entire net worth, which he surely believed was much greater than $500,000. He needed to liquidate everything I owned to save himself. He wasn't just trying to rob me. He was trying to sacrifice himself with my body. Then another, far colder question arose. If he was bankrupt and facing a $5 million demand, a cornered animal losing money everywhere, where did he get the money to attack me? A lawsuit like that, even a fraudulent one, isn't cheap. Lawyers, even the shadiest ones, require retainers. They don't work on credit. And Lynch, the discredited criminal, wasn't going to sign perjury for a promise. He would have demanded cash up front, and a lot of it. Where did Rob, unable to pay his own debts, get $50,000 or $80,000 liquid to pull this off? I immediately remembered the Sunday dinner, his bragging about Arizona, and Lauren about her charity gala. When Constance died, I took a portion of the money from the sale of our Connecticut house, several $million down, and placed it in a charitable fund in my wife's name, the Constance Hayes Foundation. Its mission was to fund early oncology research, the kind of work that might have saved her. I put Lauren in charge. I thought it would give her purpose and connect her to the mother she lost. I was the founder with full oversight rights, but I never exercised them. I trusted her. It was my wife's name. She was my daughter. I called the private bank in Boston that managed the foundation's assets. A banker I hadn't spoken to in 5 years answered, surprised to hear my name. Mr. Hayes, what a pleasure. Usually, only Lauren calls. I'm sure, I said with a voice of ice. I'm going to exercise my founder's rights. I want a detailed statement of all disbursements and transfers from the Constance Hayes Foundation for the last 12 months. I want it in 5 minutes by secure email. Sir, that might take a little time to prepare. 5 minutes, I repeated, and hung up. In 3, my secure inbox chimed. I opened the PDF, my hands perfectly steady. The total balance should have been over $3 million. The number that appeared was $412,000. I started scrolling. I could feel the blood turn cold. The foundation was bleeding money. There were small, expected donations, $5,000 to a lab, $10,000 to a hospice. And then there were the other charges, administrative fees, consulting, event organizing services, enormous sums, $150,000 paid 2 months ago. Recipient, Vance Holdings GP, Rob's company. He had billed his mother-in-law's foundation for consulting. Another payment of $80,000 for gala organization. Provider, Prestige Events LLC. It took me less than a minute to check the name. It was a paper company created 3 months ago, domiciled in a post office box in Venice, California, with a single owner, Robert Vance. He was paying himself $80,000 to organize his own party. However, the definitive proof wasn't in the descriptions, but in the images of the checks. The bank attached scans of all checks issued for amounts over $20,000. I opened the one for $150,000 to Vance Holdings, then the one for $80,000 to Prestige Events. I looked at the signature line, the elegant stroke that authorized the transfers. It wasn't Rob's signature. It was Lauren Vance's. I closed my eyes. I had prepared myself for Rob's corruption. He was a snake, and snakes bite. It's their nature. A part of me was even willing to accept that Lauren was weak, manipulated, fooled, or pressured. But this wasn't weakness. It was active complicity. They were her signatures, clear as day. She wasn't just a victim. She was a partner in the looting of her mother's legacy. Stealing money meant for cancer patients from a fund bearing Constance's name to finance what? Her husband's delusion? Worse, looking at the dates, I realized those payments, 6 and 3 weeks ago, were the seed money used to pay lawyers and experts to declare me crazy. They weren't just robbing me. They were using Constance's name to finance the execution of her widower. I had believed there was a line my daughter would never cross, a line of decency, of family, of basic compassion. I was wrong. She wasn't just lost. She wasn't just fragile. She was a co-conspirator. In that instant, she stopped being the victim in this story. She stopped being, for the purposes of what was coming, my daughter. She became the enemy. I stared at her signature, the elegant loop of the L that authorized paying the lawyer who affirmed I was insane with her mother's money. The pain, the shock, the sadness evaporated, replaced by something cold, sharp, and clear. The scalpel was back in operation. I picked up the secure line. "Rebecca?" "I'm here," she answered on the first ring. "I'm reviewing the firm they hired. They're known vultures, but it doesn't matter." I cut her off. My voice sounded different, even to me, flat and hard as polished steel. Change of plan. We're not defending ourselves anymore. We're going to end them. We're going to rip this out by the roots. I'm done. I then spoke about another piece that now entered the board. Apex, Citadel Capital, and its founder, Jim Callahan. 30 years ago in Washington, Jim wasn't the owner of a multi-million-dollar fund, but a young, arrogant operator caught up in the Enright Corporation scandal. The Securities and Exchange Commission, SEC, was about to charge him with conspiracy, with 20 years in prison on the horizon. They were convinced he was part of the fraud. They were wrong. He was greedy, yes, and conceited, too. But back then, he wasn't a criminal. I was the lead investigator on the case. I spent 3 sleepless nights reviewing servers, cutting through cooked books until I found the exculpatory evidence, the original, time-stamped operations that proved Callahan had been a victim, not an accomplice. I saved him. I saved his career and his freedom. I did it because it was the truth, and my job was to balance the books. Years later, when Constance died, he called me, his voice serious. "Eli, I know what you did for me. If you ever need anything, a new life, a new job, a blank check, call me." I never did, until now. "Rebecca," I said, "I'll handle Apex Citadel. You do something else. I need you to prepare a document for immediate execution and seizure." "On what grounds? We don't have a judgment yet." You will, I replied. I dialed the direct line to Callahan's personal office. His assistant tried to stop me. Mr. Callahan is in a board meeting. Tell him the scalpel is calling, I said. And it's about Enright. I was on hold for 3 seconds. Eli, a confident voice boomed with a shade of fear, the fear of someone hearing a ghost from the past. Is everything all right? Hello, Jim. It's been a while. I'm not calling about old times. I'm here to cash my marker. Name it. You have a loan with a subject named Robert Vance, an Arizona resort project. It's in default, bankrupt. Hold on, he said. I heard him typing. Yes, 50 million. A disaster. My team is going to execute his collateral on Monday. The guy's an idiot. I don't want you to execute anything, Jim. I want you to sell me his debt. All of it. The note, the collateral, the default, everything. It's toxic paper, Eli. I'm not buying it as an investment, I clarified. I want to be his sole creditor. I'm transferring the outstanding principal, the $5 million, right now from a blind trust. No trace back to me. Just a silent change of creditor. He was smart. He didn't ask why. You want to be the monster, Eli? Fine. You saved my life. It's the least I can do. He shouted orders to someone in his office. My lawyers will handle the assignment today. In 1 hour, the debt will be yours. Good hunting. Thank you, Jim. No, thank you. I hung up and returned to Rebecca. Done, I told her. Apex Citadel doesn't have the note anymore. I do. God, she murmured. You bought his debt. You're his bank. I'm his worst nightmare, I corrected. Now finish that seizure document. He is in default to me for $5 million. I want a recorded lien on the mansion, his cars, Vance Holdings, everything. I'll have it ready for the process server in an hour. No, I countered. We're not serving him anything. He's expecting a fight over my sanity. He doesn't know his entire life is at stake. We won't give him notice. We'll go straight into the courthouse and serve it to him at the worst possible moment, the day of the hearing. The courtroom hallway smelled of stale coffee and cheap wax. Rebecca held her thin briefcase. She looked at me seriously. Eli, ready? I adjusted my shirt cuffs. I wasn't wearing the knit sweater and corduroy pants they were used to seeing me in, the beige clothing of a man fading away. That a day I wore armor, a high-quality, custom-tailored charcoal gray suit I hadn't touched in over 10 years, since I testified before the Senate Banking Committee. It still fit me perfectly. I had cut my hair, and I was clean-shaven. I wasn't the man they thought. I was the man I had been. Ready? I replied. Let's go in. The room was small, beige, and cheerless. Rob and Lauren were already at the petitioner's table, whispering, almost euphoric. Their lawyer, a man in a shiny suit with too much gel, confidently organized his papers. When Lauren looked up, she saw me in the suit, and a nervous giggle escaped her. She covered her mouth, but her shoulders were shaking. She leaned toward her husband. I could almost hear her. Look, he thinks this is a funeral. Rob scanned me from my neck to my shoes and cracked a condescending smile. He shook his head slowly, as if my attempt at dignity were ridiculous. Their lawyer gave me a quick glance, instantly classified me as a 71-year-old man playing dress-up, and erased me from his mind. He had no idea. We sat down at the defendant's table. Rebecca placed her briefcase on the table and sat beside me, calm, tense as a bowstring. We didn't exchange a word. All rise, the board bailiff intoned. We stood. The judge entered from a side door, his robe slightly worn, his expression tired. The face of a man who has seen too much and is paid too little. He settled into his high chair. "You may be seated." He put on his gold-rimmed glasses and picked up the day's file. The nameplate read, Judge Franklin Rivers. "Good morning," he murmured monotonously. "We are here for the first matter on the docket, File 881B, in the matter of the guardianship of Elijah Hayes." He read the name and, purely out of routine, looked up to identify the defendant. He looked at me. The air went out of the room. The judge didn't just stop, he was petrified. His face, until then a mask of bureaucracy, turned to ash. His eyes, magnified by the glasses, widened dramatically. The cheap pen he held slipped from his fingers and hit the wood with an exaggerated clatter in the silence. Rob and Lauren stared at him, bewildered. Their lawyer looked up, annoyed by the interruption. The judge's hand was visibly trembling. He stared at me, his mouth slightly open. He leaned toward the gooseneck microphone, forgetting it amplified him. In a voice of pure astonishment, he muttered, "God, is that really him?" All heads turned toward me. They were no longer looking at the judge. They were looking at me. Rob and Lauren's faces went blank. This was not in the script. I had recognized him, too. Not the gray-haired judge of almost 60, but the nervous, ambitious 35-year-old assistant prosecutor, drowning in a case that was too big for him, the Enright case. That young prosecutor had been handed the biggest file of his career, a multi-billion-dollar corporate fraud, and he was losing it. His star witnesses were falling one by one, and his case and his future was crumbling. Until his expert witness took the stand, the man they called it when the numbers were a tangled web of lies. The man who, in a single day, broke down a $1 billion fraud on a spreadsheet that a jury could understand. The man who sent 12 financial directors and accountants to prison. Franklin Rivers only knew my name. I had gifted him his career. Now, he looked at me as if he were seeing a dead man. He gripped the edges of his bench hard. He no longer saw a senile old man. He saw the scalpel. Finally, he tore his gaze away from me and slowly directed it toward the petitioner's table. It locked onto Rob's lawyer. "Counselor," he said, his voice now cold and sharp, "are you aware of who the defendant is?" The attorney, Miller, confused, stood up. "He's, Mr. Elijah Hayes, Your Honor, a retiree." Rivers let out a brief, harsh exhale. Not a laugh, but a warning. "No, Counselor," he replied in a voice that filled the room. "That's the scalpel Hayes. I wish you luck. You're going to need it." Rob's lawyer, Miller, swallowed hard, as if something had caught in his throat. He looked at his client. Rob made a quick, sharp gesture. Trying to compose himself, Miller cleared his throat. "Your Honor, my client, Mr. Vance, calls his first and principal witness, Dr. Arthur Lynch." A side door opened. A small, greasy man in a poorly cut suit walked in. He looked more like a basement tenant than a medical professional. He avoided everyone's gaze, especially the judge's. He sat in the witness stand, his hand trembling as he swore to tell the truth. Miller tried to regain his composure. "Dr. Lynch, did you have the opportunity to evaluate Mr. Hayes?" "Yes," he replied in an oily, practiced voice. "I conducted a complete psychological evaluation." "And what were your conclusions?" "Mr. Hayes displayed severe signs of cognitive deterioration. His short-term memory is practically non-existent. He exhibits classic symptoms of paranoid delusions, especially regarding family finances and the intentions of his relatives." He adjusted his filthy glasses as if reading. "In my professional opinion, he constitutes a danger to himself and his estate." "In your professional opinion, is he capable of managing his affairs?" "Absolutely not," he said, shaking his head with false sadness. He requires permanent supervision. I remained motionless. He was describing the man they wanted me to be. Thank you, Doctor, Miller concluded with a triumphant little smile. Your witness. Rebecca stood up. She wasn't carrying a stack of files or a laptop, just a single sheet of paper. She walked toward the stand with surgical calm. Good morning, Dr. Lynch, she greeted him politely, her voice soft but cutting. Or perhaps I should call you Mr. Lynch, because you are a mister, aren't you? Lynch blinked, confused. I'm a doctor. Rebecca turned to the judge. Your Honor, I can find no record that Mr. Lynch is a psychologist, psychiatrist, neurologist, or anything of the sort. She turned back to the witness. Mr. Lynch, what kind of doctor are you? I have medical training, he stammered, looking desperately at Miller. The lawyer jumped up. Objection? Irrelevant. Overruled, Rivers snapped, not taking his eyes off the witness. Answer the question. I was a dentist, Lynch mumbled. A murmur ran through the room. A dentist, Rebecca repeated, letting the words sink in. Or rather, an ex-dentist, isn't that right? I'm retired, he lied. Retired? She raised an eyebrow. Or rather, had your license permanently revoked by the state of California in 2019? That's public record, isn't it? Revocation for severe malpractice, massive fraud against insurers, and for operating an opioid pill mill out of your Reseda practice. Is that correct, Mr. Lynch? The witness was shaking. He was a cornered rat. Objection! Harassment! Miller yelled. This is cross-examination, Counselor Law, the judge cut up. And it's fascinating. Proceed, Mr. Sands. Rebecca took another step. One last question for your expert opinion, Mr. Lynch. Did you or did you not receive a $25,000 transfer from a company called Vance Holdings GP 3 days before signing this affidavit? Objection! Unfounded speculation! Miller screamed, now bordering on panic. Your Honor, I have the transfer receipt right here, Rebecca said. She walked to the projector and placed the sheet down. The image appeared on the wall. A clear bank receipt from Vance Holdings GP to Arthur Lynch for $25,000. Memo. Consulting. The judge's face flushed. He looked at Lynch as if he were venom. Mr. Lynch, he growled, you are under oath and have just committed blatant perjury in my courtroom. You have presented a fraudulent document as part of a criminal conspiracy with the petitioners. He signaled the bailiff. Bailiff, detain this man. He is arrested for perjury. The click of the handcuffs echoed in the silence. Lauren let out a choked shriek. Rob froze, watching his expert witness being led away in cuffs. His case had walked out, handcuffed and behind him. Miller was lost and his papers scattered. Rob, more than pale, was livid with rage. He grabbed his lawyer's sleeve, whispering something violently. Trembling, the lawyer studied it up. Your Honor, my client, Mr. Vance, wishes to testify to clarify this misunderstanding. Really? Rivers said, his voice dripping with sarcasm. He wants to testify after his primary witness has been arrested for perjury? In complicity with him? He looked at Rebecca. Any objection? None, Your Honor, she replied. We'd love to hear it. Very well. Mr. Vance, to the stand. Remember, you will also be under oath. Rob practically shoved the bailiff aside to get up. He tried to project confidence, but he was a man drowning and making more froth than necessary. He sat down, gripping the edge of the railing. Your Honor, he began in a rehearsed tone of victimhood. This whole thing is a tragedy. My wife and I are just worried about him. That's what this has always been about. He gestured toward me. He's confused, paranoid. He locks himself in that guest house for days. He hides his accounts. He accused us of trying to rob him. We only wanted to protect him. His lawyer tossed him a soft question. So, your only motivation was concern. 100%, Rob assured him. It's for his own good. Rebecca rose again. Mr. Vance, well, she said with feigned curiosity, you just declared under oath that Mr. Hayes is not lucid and is paranoid. That's right. And that this supposed lack of lucidity is especially noticeable in financial matters. Exactly. He doesn't understand modern finance. That's why he's not in his right mind. That's an important part. Yes, I understand. She nodded. Explain something to me. 2 weeks ago, you approached him to ask for $500,000, didn't you? I offered him an investment, an opportunity to be part of the family's success, he rushed to say. So, you asked for $500,000 from a man you claim is confused and paranoid, Rebecca countered. Was that a test of lucidity? His refusal is what proved it. Rob tried to evade. I offered him the deal of a lifetime. A guaranteed 40% return in 6 months with my Arizona resort. It was a sure thing. He turned to the judge. And he said no, that it was too risky. He was so senile, so scared. He couldn't see the opportunity. That's when we knew he had lost the ability to make sensible decisions. Rebecca waited for him to finish digging, and then she pushed the chair. A golden opportunity, you say, she repeated. A sure shot, a deal that couldn't fail. Is that why the project is $50 million over budget and facing 16 contractor liens for lack of payment? The color drained from his face. That's a lie. That information is privileged. How? It's not privileged when you're in default, Mr. Vance, she said, raising her voice. And your golden opportunity is actually a sinking ship, isn't it? Isn't it true that your main lender, the Apex Citadel Capital Fund, declared you in violation of the credit covenants and issued an immediate $5 million payment demand 10 days ago? Rob opened and closed his mouth, unable to make a sound. Miller looked at him in horror. $5 million you didn't have, Rebecca continued. You were and are completely bankrupt. And yet, you found money to hire Attorney Miller, to pay $25,000 in cash to a discredited dentist. My question is, where did that money come from? Rob looked at Lauren, at the judge, at anyone who could give him an answer. Rebecca gave it to him. You got it, she said with contempt. From a charitable foundation. The Constance Hayes Foundation. Hearing her mother's name, Lauren, who had been sitting motionless, let out a choked sob. Isn't that right, Mr. Vance? Rebecca continued, her voice like thunder. When you were broke and your empire was crumbling, you resorted to your wife and convinced her to steal. You persuaded her to sign checks. $150,000 to Vance Holdings for consulting, $80,000 to Prestige Events, a paper company of yours for Gala Organization, a total of $230,000 embezzled from a fund for cancer research. She turned for the first time toward Lauren. You didn't just lie to the judge, Lauren. You lied to her, to Constance, to yourself. You told me they were legitimate administrative expenses, Lauren shrieked, standing up and shaking. You said it was approved, that it was normal. You made me steal from my mother. Rob lost what little restraint he had left. He leaped up in the stand, purple with rage, and pointed at my table. Shut up, Lauren. This is his fault. That selfish old man. He had the money. He could have fixed everything with one check, and he said no. He forced me. It's his fault. The room erupted in shouting, sobs, and objections. The judge slammed his gavel. Silence, Burr, he roared. Mr. Vance, if you don't keep quiet, I'll hold you in contempt. Mrs. Vance, compose yourself. Rob slumped back into the seat. Lauren was crying hysterically. River's eyes moved toward me. The anger was gone. They now gleamed with respect and a profound curiosity. Mr. Hayes, he said firmly. Your opponents have already presented their case, and in the press have confessed to a long list of financial crimes. But the petition for guardianship is still before me. Do you wish to say anything in your defense regarding your competence? I stood up without bracing myself. I did not tremble. The room was so quiet, you could hear the hum of the lights. I looked at Rob, then at Lauren, and finally at the judge. Thank you, Your Honor, I said in a clear voice that resonated in the room. But today, I haven't come to discuss my sanity or to defend myself. My competence is not in doubt. My record speaks for itself. I paused. No, Your Honor. Today, I didn't come as a defendant. I came to file a criminal complaint. Miller jumped up. Objection! Theater. This is not the forum. Be seated, Counselor, Rivers cut him off. You opened this door by bringing this man into my courtroom and calling him delusional. The court will hear what he has to say. Proceed, Mr. Hayes. Mr. Vance has already confessed to a part of it, I began, my tone that of an anatomist. He has admitted to embezzling $230,000 from the Constance Hayes Foundation, a fund created in my wife's memory for oncology research. But he didn't act alone. He couldn't. He needed a signature, that of the foundation's director. I looked at Lauren. And you signed, Lauren. With full knowledge, you emptied your mother's legacy to finance your husband's lifestyle, and this pathetic attempt to declare me insane. She let out an animalistic groan. No, Dad. You signed, I interrupted without raising my voice. It's not a reproach. It's a fact. Her lawyer clung to one last argument. He can't do anything to them. He's a nobody. He's broke. He lives in a guest house. Even if he files a complaint, it will be his word against theirs. He's just a senile old man. Ah, I said, smiling for the first time, a thin, cold smile. I gave a slight nod to Rebecca. She stood up, opened her briefcase, and pulled out a blue-covered legal file. She didn't hand it to the judge or to me. She crossed the room and placed it in front of Rob. What? What is this? He stammered. That, Mr. Vance, Rebecca said in a clear voice, is an urgent notice of execution and seizure. Miller snatched the file, read the first page, and went gray. This is impossible, he whispered. It's from Apex Citadel Capital. But the date. Rob tore it out of his hand. What does it say? It looks like you're a little behind on the news, Rob, I said. My eyes didn't leave him. You were right. You defaulted on your $5 million loan with Apex Citadel, and they were ready to seize everything. A shame. That credit was sold. They were so eager to get rid of it that they accepted an immediate offer. I bought your debt, Rob. The whole thing, the note, the collateral, everything. You're no longer in default to Citadel. You're in default to me. I took a step forward. And unlike Callahan, I'm not here to renegotiate or give you an extension. I'm calling the note today. The mansion is mine. The cars are mine. Vance Holdings is mine. Everything you thought was yours now belongs to me. I turned back to Rivers, who was watching the scene with something that looked very much like admiration. Your Honor, this sad comedy of a guardianship is over. What begins now is the eviction and the settling of accounts. From there, Rob's situation ceased to be a trial and became a foregone conclusion. A man who shouts his confession in open court doesn't have many legal escape routes. He tried to fight. He hired an even more expensive lawyer with money he surely didn't have. They tried to paint me as a spiteful, manipulative old man who had set a trap. They spoke of extreme stress, of desperation. It was a pathetic defense, like a rat caught in a steel trap blaming the cheese. The district attorney's office very interested since Rivers' detailed report, didn't have to try hard. They offered Rob a plea deal to save a trial. He arrogantly refused, convinced he could con a jury. They took him to trial and buried him. I didn't have to testify. The documents were enough. The Foundation bank statements, the fake invoices from his shell companies, Lynch's perjury, his own bank fraud in Arizona. It was an avalanche of paper, and every page had his name on it. The jury deliberated for less than an hour. They found him guilty on the 12 counts: wire fraud, securities fraud, and aggravated embezzlement. The judge looked at him, seeing not an entrepreneur, but a man who was willing to destroy another's life to hide his crimes, and decided to make him an example. He didn't give him a comfortable white-collar prison. He gave him 10 years in state prison. I watched him leave in an orange jumpsuit instead of his custom-made suit. He had finally run out of cards to play. The books, at least in his case, were balanced. Lauren was the hardest part. She was my daughter, Constance's blood, but she was also a co-conspirator. The evidence was irrefutable. Her signature on the checks, her life of luxury sustained week after week on money stolen from her mother's legacy. Her lawyer came to see me, almost pleading. "Mr. Hayes, she was manipulated. She's a victim of psychological abuse. Rob controlled her." "Did he hold her hand to sign?" I asked. "Did he force her at gunpoint? She's an adult woman. She made decisions." He asked me to speak with the DA to request clemency, to write a letter of support, ensuring she was a good person who made a mistake. I said no. I wouldn't interfere. This wasn't about revenge. It was about consequences. I had spent 10 years allowing her to live without any. I had tolerated her weakness, her greed, her light cruelty. Stepping in now to rescue her from the fire she helped start would have been the last and worst act of a failed father. She had to face the balance sheet alone. She was indicted, just like Rob. But she was smarter. She saw the end of the road and accepted a plea deal. She pleaded guilty to misuse of charitable funds, a felony. The judge was less harsh. He listened to her tears and her account of Rob's control, but he also read the bank statements. He sentenced her to 3 years of formal probation. He forced her to repay every penny of the $230,000 to the Constance Hayes Foundation and added one more condition: 2,000 hours of mandatory community service. Not picking up trash or filing papers. He assigned her to the Sierra Meadows Assisted Living Facility, specifically the locked dementia and Alzheimer's unit. For 2 years, every weekend, my daughter, the woman who tried to have her father declared senile to steal his assets, would be bathing, feeding, and cleaning men and women who were truly lost, people who couldn't remember their own names or the faces of their children. I wanted her to see it, to smell it, to understand in her bones the reality of the weapon she tried to use against me. It was a fair sentence, perhaps the first authentic lesson she had received in her life. 6 months later, the silence on the property was absolute. The ridiculous mansion they had built was gone. I ordered it sold at auction, along with the land that had always been mine. I sold the guest house too, everything. The proceeds were divided into 2 funds, half to refill and substantially increase the Constance Hayes Foundation, now under serious professional management. The other half was put into a trust for Tyrese, inaccessible until he turns 25. I was in the empty guest house, surrounded by stacked cardboard boxes, the walls bare. In the hidden office, I was packing up my files. The monitors were black. The scalpel was going back into the drawer. I heard a hesitant step on the porch. Not a knock, just a presence. I opened the door. It was Lauren. Transformed. But not like someone who went to a spa changes. Like someone who has walked through a fire. She was no longer wearing designer clothes, but a faded blue scrub top with the Sierra Meadows logo embroidered on it. Her hair pulled back, her face pale. Thinner, with 10 years added to her appearance. The arrogance, the easy laugh, the light cruelty. It had all burned away. Her hands, once perfectly manicured, were red and cracked. She stood on the threshold, watching me seal the last box. When she spoke, her voice wasn't the one I remembered either. It was a rough, tired, almost dead thread. "Why?" she asked. "Why what, Lauren? Why did you let it go this far?" Her voice trembled, not with sadness, but with exhausted anger. "You knew what Rob was. You knew what he was doing. You're him, the scalpel. You could have stopped this any time. When he asked for the $500,000, you could have told him, 'I know you're bankrupt.' You could have shown me those papers. You could have warned me." She took a step into the empty room. "But you didn't. You let us. You let me sign those checks. You let us file the lawsuit. You sat in your little house and watched us destroy ourselves. You didn't have to ruin us or send him to prison. Or," she pointed to the cheap uniform, "or do this to me. You wanted this. You wanted to punish us." I finished taping the box, smoothed the tape down with my palm, and turned to face her. I looked at the stranger who had once been my daughter. "Because if I had stopped you, you wouldn't have learned anything," I answered, without raising my voice. "You would have hated me for a week. You would have called me a paranoid, controlling old man. And then you would have gone back to him. You would have believed his next lie. You would have found another way to give him the money. You would have kept bleeding your mother's foundation, gala after gala. I didn't let you do anything. I only allowed you to be who you were." I walked toward the old desk. "When you were 10 years old, you stole $50 from your mother's purse. You wanted a toy, and she had told you no," I recounted. Lauren flinched. Constance knew. She cried for an hour in the bathroom, convinced she had failed as a mother. Then she came out, hugged you, and didn't say anything. She replaced the $50 in her purse. She forgave you without consequence because she had a soft heart and wanted peace. I looked into her hard, clear eyes. "I believe in ledgers. The numbers always have to balance. You never paid for that first theft. So you kept taking things, bigger and bigger things. You didn't respect me. Rob didn't respect me. And neither of you respected your mother's memory. You didn't just cross a line, Lauren. You erased it and danced on her grave for the price of a pool." She didn't answer. She just cried silently. "I didn't destroy you," I added. "You were already destroyed. You were just bankrupt in every way a person can be. I only presented you with the bill." I took an envelope from the drawer and held it out to her. "Here is the address of a small studio in Burbank. The first 3 months' rent is paid. Inside is a bus pass. After that, you're on your own. The books are clean." She took it with a trembling hand. She looked at me one last time, searching, I don't know if for forgiveness, comfort, or the father she thought she had. That man was gone. She turned around and walked away. I watched her leave. I'm 71 years old. I've retired twice. The first time from my job, the second time from being an invisible, compliant, and silent old man. The day of the hearing, I just decided to take the pen back. My name is Elijah Hayes, and finally, my books are balanced. This whole hell taught me a painful and essential lesson. Silence should never be confused with weakness. For 10 years, I allowed my love for my family to blind me to their contempt. I thought patience was a virtue, but I learned that patience without firm boundaries is nothing more than permission to be humiliated. True strength is not about who shouts the loudest, but about knowing the precise moment to move and having the discipline to wait for that instant. I wasn't seeking revenge. I was seeking accountability. Sometimes, the deepest act of self-respect, and parried seriously toward others, is deciding once and for all to balance the ledger. I'm really glad you're here and that I could share my story with you. If you liked it, show me by liking the video and subscribing to my channel. Let's see how many of us there are. Write in the comments which city you're watching from and what time it is. I'm so curious to know where all you wonderful people are tuning in from. If you want to support me a little extra, you can also send a small donation. I share new life stories for you every single day. And now, 2 of my most popular stories will pop up on the screen, so you can choose what to watch next.